Have you ever thought about doing a 1031 exchange? Do you own investment property and want to move that money to another investment property? Or are you considering investing and just looking for more information for the future? This is a great video for you. I had the absolute pleasure of speaking with John Boyd, the founder of Banker Exchange here in Greenville. They help a lot of people through the 1031 exchange process, and it is my pleasure to introduce him to you guys right here today.
I came to Greenville in 1982 to go to Furman University, and I got a degree in business administration with a concentration in accounting, mainly because I knew I wanted at some point in time to run my own business. So I graduated from Furman. I stayed in the Greenville market because I'd gotten a job with the regional CPA firm here in town. I spent 4 years at the CPA firm, and then I spent 3 years in retail securities with a broker dealer out of Nashville, Tennessee, in their Greenville office. And it's while I was there that I was introduced to the 1031 exchange concept. The regulations had just come out in 1984, or the code had just come out in 1984. The regulations had just been issued in 1991, and this was April of 1992 when I facilitated my first 1031 exchange. So we've been doing this for 31 years. And it was the experience of identifying a problem and solving that problem or filling that need that kind of started me on my entrepreneurial path. The regulations in 1991 introduced the concept of this independent person to hold a taxpayer's money during a 1031 exchange. And that role was defined as a qualified intermediary. And so that's the role that we've been filling since 1992, is the role of the qualified intermediary in the 1031 exchange. So let's suppose that you have a piece of property with some appreciation in it. You bought it for $500,000 and now it's worth $1 million. And if you were to sell that piece of property, you would encounter, let's call it 25% capital gains tax between your state and your federal capital gains tax. You might give up 25% of your profit. So you've got a $500,000 profit, 25% of that would be $125,000. But you know as a taxpayer that you really want to reinvest in another piece of real estate, another piece of investment real estate. And 1031 allows you to roll that money into that second piece of real estate. So you sold a piece of raw land, you sold it for $1 million, but you've decided that what you'd really like to have is a resort rental. You'd like to have a condominium at the beach that you're going to rent to, for short-term rental, to vacationers that want to come to the beach. And so you basically trade a piece of raw land for a piece of resort rental property. I think the most important thing is to get educated early, before you've actually transferred the relinquished property. When you start thinking, when you have a piece of property that's got some appreciation in it, a piece of property that's eligible, it's trade property, it's used in a trade or business, or it's held for investment, it's very important for you to start the process early. And that is, get educated, find out how the process works, and engage a qualified intermediary. The earlier you can start, the better the transaction's going to go. The second thing I would say is it's not nearly as complicated as a lot of people think. And our job is to make the process as simple as possible. Well, David, that's a great question. I think it's been instrumental in the growth, in the upstate region. It's very difficult for you to get in your car and drive down any major highway, any major road in Greenville or Spartanburg County and not pass a building that doesn't have our fingerprints on it in some exchange process. From downtown Greenville to the Five Forks area to Lake Kiowee. We've done business virtually down every major road in the upstate. Probably the most important is what type of property qualifies. 1031 exchange is you have to meet the qualified use standard, and that is the property both the relinquished property and the replacement property have to be used for trade, business, or investment purposes. The second is that it's extremely difficult, and here again, It looks complicated from the outside and to the uninitiated, but our job is to make that process, educate the taxpayer and make that process as simple as possible. The third, and probably one of the most important, is that the taxpayer cannot touch the proceeds from the sale of the relinquished property during the exchange process. It's not as simple as selling one piece of property and buying another piece of property. If you haven't put the proper documentation in place and taken the proper steps, you're going to find yourself on the wrong side of the IRS. The timelines for a 1031 exchange, there are two real time frames, and they both start with the transfer of the relinquished property. So that's day zero. You have 45 days to identify your replacement property or potential replacement properties, and you have 180 days. You have up until the due date of your tax return or the 180th day to complete your exchange. And it's the earlier of those two dates. So realistically, for an exchange that starts prior to October the 17th, you've got 45 days to identify and 180 days to close. Sure, there are no regulations, there are no restrictions on the number of replacement properties that you can buy, and there are no restrictions to the number of relinquished properties that you can put into an exchange. So many investors put 2 or 3 relinquished properties in, and they aggregate that equity or that proceeds and they buy one piece of property. So they trade multiple properties for a bigger property, and they also go the opposite direction. They may trade one piece of property for 2 or 3 pieces of replacement property. So there are no restrictions. Any non-like-kind property or any cash that you receive during the exchange is going to be taxable to the extent that you have gain. The term we use to describe that property is boot. No, you can do them as frequently as you like to. There are some restrictions as far as making sure that your relinquished property and your replacement property both qualify for the qualified use, i.e. being held for investment. So property bought for speculation or property bought for resale are specifically excluded from 1031 eligibility. But let's say you bought something now, you traded something today, you traded it again 5 years from now, you traded it again 5 years from now. We have a lot of clients whose strategy is to continue to do 1031 exchanges until they pass away. And that way they can take advantage of favorable tax treatment that's currently available in the estate tax code. So the qualified intermediary is a role that was defined in the regulations in 1991. And the IRS, it's not as simple as a taxpayer selling one piece of property and acquiring a second piece. The IRS wants those two transactions to be interdependent upon each other. And the easiest way to do that is through a qualified intermediary. So in theory, what happens is the taxpayer transfers the relinquished property to the qualified intermediary, who immediately sells it to the contracted buyer. And then the taxpayer identifies replacement property that the qualified intermediary acquires and immediately transfers to the taxpayer to complete their exchange. By putting the intermediary in the middle, the taxpayer has given up one piece of property and acquired a second piece of property by way of the qualified intermediary. They never really had cash, they never really received cash. The answer to that question is yes, but you really want to look at the tax ramifications. So we get a lot of inquiries from people who have recently inherited a piece of property. And the interesting thing is, under the current estate tax code, you're only going to want to do a 1031 exchange if you have appreciation or gain in that property. When you inherit a piece of property from a family member or from a friend who wills it to you through the estate process, that asset gets a step up in basis under current estate tax law. You get a step up in basis. So it's conceivable that while you think you have a big gain because you didn't pay anything for the property, you might have basis that's equal to the sales price. So, and that's much different than if you receive that property as a deathbed bequest, okay, or a deathbed gift. Those are the situations they really break my heart to see them happen, because if you'd have just waited 5 or 10 days, a taxpayer, So to back up, if you inherit a piece of property through the estate process that's worth $1 million, and you turn around a week later and you sell it for $1 million, you have no gain in that transaction because your basis was $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
But if your father gave you that, he realized he was sick, and he gave you that piece of property a week before he died, he deeded it over to you as a gift. Okay, your basis, his basis becomes your basis, and if he didn't pay anything for it, then you don't have any basis, and you may have a $1 million gain on that piece of property. So it's important for taxpayers to understand that in their kind of end of life planning, that, you know, in most cases it's beneficial to let it go through the estate tax process instead of making an end of life gift. Well, there's two great ways. Number one, you can call our number at 864-271-1449. That's our main office line, and speak to our intake coordinator, and she will answer most of your upfront questions. She'll start you on the process of documentation. She'll get your document file started if it's appropriate to move forward, and if necessary, she'll bring one of the exchange coordinators, one of the more experienced professionals in our office, to answer your questions. If you want to sit down appointment, you're welcome to call and schedule an appointment, or you can go to the website, which is www.bankers1031.com, and there's some educational videos and some information on the website. We also do from time to time public seminars. We'll do lunch and learns. If you've got an investment group or you're a real estate broker and you want us to come into your office, we can do a lunch and learn. We do those for investment groups, CPAs, attorneys, real estate professionals. We also offer through an affiliate, 1031education.com. We offer some continuing education classes for the real estate community. And so that's really the best way. The biggest benefit to the 1031 exchange is tax deferral. When I started my career in public accounting, one of the senior partners on one of my very first days said, a tax dollar deferred is a tax dollar saved. And that's kind of resonated with me throughout my whole career. And, you know, it's often said that with financial literacy, the most important thing that you have is time. Okay, that's the most important aspect of investing. And that's because of the power of compounding. You know, the more time you can allow your mind to grow, the better off. The second thing is, the second most important thing is ROI. And a lot of people feel like that's the return on investment. And in reality, what that is the rate of investment. Because if somebody has opportunity for an investment that will generate a 50% return, but yet they don't have any money to put in it, that 50% return doesn't do them any good. Okay, so the faster you can invest, the more you can invest. Well, the beautiful thing about 1031 exchange is it allows you to go into your next transaction with maybe 25% more equity. So if you put $100 into an investment or $100,000 into an investment, and it's going to grow at 10% for 10 years, it's going to grow to a certain amount of money. Well, what happens if you put $125,000 in that investment? It's going to grow conceivably to 25% more than you had previously. And so that's the really big thing, is you have the power of compounding working for you on somebody else's money. It's often said that a 1031 exchange is an interest-free loan from the government that can be resized anytime you want to resize it, and only gets repaid when you want to repay it. And if you happen to still owe it when you die, it's forgiven. David, it's interesting because over the years they've gotten much, much more popular, and that's because the public has a greater knowledge of the 1031 exchange. When I first started, it was difficult to, if you will, spread the word. And I did a lot of seminars. I went to closings every time. Every time we had a client that was selling a piece of property or buying a piece of property, I was sitting at the closing table because the attorneys really didn't know what was going on, the clients didn't know what was going on, and the realtors, the real estate professionals didn't know what was going on. And as they've become more popular, as they've been in the mainstream for a greater period of time, they have gotten more popular. There's more knowledge out there. There are more people providing information on 1031 exchange. Real estate people are using them. Real estate professionals are using them in their business. There have been cottage industries that came up. For instance, the Delaware Statutory Trust, DST, becoming a potential replacement property solution. Before that, there was the tenant in common, was a very popular structure that was created specifically for meeting a 1031 investor's need. And so, the first year we were in business, we might have done 6 transactions. Now we'll do, 6 transactions a week, 7 transactions a week. And it varies, it ebbs and flows throughout the year. The end of the year you kind of have a push because a lot of people feel like, I got to get this done before the end of the year, and that's okay. And sometimes you get a big push at the end of the month. Yeah, they're extremely popular now. To give you an idea, the DST market there's probably $5 billion worth of equity raised in just that specialty. That doesn't include the fee simple interest in real estate that closes. Industry wide, there's statistics available, but I don't really track those. So technically the answer to that is yes. However, back in 2000, the IRS gave us a safe harbor. They provided a safe harbor for those instances where a taxpayer needs to acquire their replacement property before they've disposed of their relinquished property. They introduced the concept of an exchange accommodating title holder. And what that exchange accommodating title holder does is they take title to typically the replacement property of a taxpayer and they hold that piece of property for the taxpayer until the taxpayer can sell or dispose of their relinquished property. Because otherwise, the IRS is going to treat it, if you just simply bought your replacement property and then sold your relinquished property, they're going to treat that way. So we use a vehicle, it's called a reverse exchange, it's a mechanism, and we call it a reverse exchange, but what we're really doing is allowing the taxpayer to dispose of their relinquished property before they acquire their replacement property. We do facilitate reverse and construction exchanges, and we've done so since really 1995. So even before the IRS told us that it was an approved structure, we were already facilitating those types of transactions. First and foremost, the IRS does not allow you to make improvements to a piece of property that you already own, whether you've owned that piece of property for 5 years or for 5 minutes. And so if you have a situation where to meet your exchange requirement, to meet your value requirement, you need to, let's say you've sold something for $1 million and you're going to buy a resort rental for $750,000, but it needs work. Okay, you've got $250,000 worth of upgrades to it or work that you want to have done to it. You use that same concept of this exchange accommodating title holder, and what will happen in that case is the qualified intermediary will take title, or the exchange accommodating title holder will take title to that property at closing. They'll own the title until you've spent enough money to get to your exchange value requirement, and then they'll convey that property back to you.
Okay, perfect.
So,
that makes
sense. And that works whether it's a renovation or whether it's a new construction. I mean, we've had situations where we built entire buildings in 180 days because somebody disposed of something, they had a piece of dirt that they wanted to build the improvements on, and so they sold their piece of property. We used their cash to acquire the land. We used their cash to improve the piece of property, and then on the 180th day, or when construction was finished, whichever came sooner, we conveyed that piece of property with improvements to them. Sure, we do a lot of continuing ed in the Greenville market and in the Columbia market and in the Charleston market, throughout our service area. But something really exciting that we've got coming up now is the first annual South Carolina Real Estate Rocky Mountain Summit. And that'll be February 9th through the 11th in Snowmass Village, Colorado. We have 8 hours of continuing education if you happen to be a licensed real estate broker needing continuing ed. And we'll have 4 hours of core, and then we have 2 hours of elective. Those electives are real estate, taxes, and you. So you can come in and learn a little bit more about the tax system. You can learn more about the tax deferral strategies that might be employed by real estate investors. And then the second 2-hour continuing education elective is 1031 Intro to Expert, where we'll take you from the very beginnings of 1031, the very basics, to more esoteric and more complex structures. That's in Snowmass, Colorado. The great thing is we have 4 hours of class on Sunday afternoon. The electives are on Monday and Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. So you have plenty of time to enjoy sporting activities that the Rocky Mountains afford in the wintertime, whether it's skiing, snowboarding, snowmobiling, hiking, fly fishing. It's just a great environment, and we look forward to it.
Terrific. Would that appeal to non-brokers as well?
Non-brokers may have an interest in it. If you don't, for nothing other than, you can spend 4 hours or 8 hours and learn more about the core piece. That's really kind of real estate focused, because it's what the real estate license law requires the real estate professionals to take on an annual basis or biannual basis. The other two probably would have a benefit to just real estate investors as well. And if you want to throw in 2 or 3 days of skiing around it, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, indeed. John, what are your favorite things about operating in this industry?
It's really helping people. At the end of the day, it's nice to see people defer some tax, be able to grow their wealth, and solve problems that they have. Help them through, in a lot of times, difficult situations that they may be experiencing, because you never know how somebody got their piece of property, and or you look at somebody and you're like, you got $1 million gain here, you're going to give them $250,000. That's a lot of money, and it can be life changing for somebody. But, we've had situations where people were literally land poor. Okay, they had so much land that they didn't have much of a lifestyle. And we had a client that he sold a farm. He had a farm and been in his family for years and years, and he wanted to roll all the money into more real estate. And I looked at his wife and I said, "What do you want out of this?" And she said, "I want 2 things." She said, "I want a new car, and I want to trip around the world. I want to go on a cruise." And I looked at him and I said, "I think we're going to take an exception in this case. I think it's probably in your best interest to take an exception. Okay, take some money off the table, take your wife on a cruise, buy your wife a new car, and then you can buy real estate with the rest of it." Okay, it wasn't the most tax efficient strategy, but it was probably the best thing for his relationship at that time.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I would say 1031 exchange is not right in every situation. Okay, I don't think it's wise to let the tax tail wag the dog. And there are situations, just like the one I described, where it's in your best interest to diversify. Okay, maybe you've got way too much real estate and you need to rebalance your portfolio, or you've got other things that need to be taken care of, or you need some liquidity in your life. It's okay to, not do 100% 1031, because you can do a partial exchange. So you do a partial exchange for part of it, you pay tax on part of it, and you create a situation that makes life a a lot easier.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any interest in investment properties in the Greenville area, I would love to help you find the right property for you. Just give me a call. My details are in the description below. You can also find John's information, how to reach his company, in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you around Greenville.